Hello, everyone. Welcome to our medically complex patient case. This is case 2B, Tuesday presentation about our patient Vince. Okay, so some key findings from our initial exam from this morning. First of all, we were able to form a line of communication with the patient using a sequence of blinks to speak with the patient due to him being unable to verbally communicate. We also determined that our patient is an ASIA A at C5. The patient had both motor and sensory intact at C5. At C6, the patient just had sensory intact bilaterally, but no muscular recruitment at the C6 level. We also determined that passive range of motion was within functional limits for all upper extremity and lower extremity motions. And we did not find any increased tone or spasticity anywhere in the patient's body. We determined that the patient was able to complete bed mobility with a max assist of 3. The patient was able to help us slightly by flexing and horizontally adducting his shoulder, but was not able to provide enough assistance to do it himself, so he required a max assist of 3. And finally, we came to the conclusion that prognosis is good for our patient based on his willingness to participate in therapy, his ability to communicate, and his desire to improve.
Good job, Sam.
Okay, so next we're going to be looking at our completed ICF model here. So looking at his health conditions, we talked about this yesterday with the spinal cord injury at C6, hypovolemia, spinal fusion, and then also right carotid artery and right jugular vein repair. Looking at then his body structures, functions, and impairments. Again, we talked about it yesterday with his tetraplegia, sensory dysfunction. Also with the fusion, he has cervical motion limitations here. And then after our initial eval, we found that he has a force production deficit, C5 and below. So his abilities right now, he is able to, kind of like Sam mentioned on the previous slide, reaching across the body. He is able to follow yes and no commands with the communication line we set up with blinking. And as he's unable to speak, he wasn't able to identify any problems at this point. But so non-identified patient problems, we found decreased strength, decreased mobility, decreased sensation, and then respiratory dysfunction. He is currently still on the ventilator. So then looking at his limitations, so then he's not able to conduct his self-care at this point. Patient identified problems, he does work, and so this vastly limits his ability to return to work currently and go about his normal employment tasks as well. So looking at the environmental factors, his subjective was able to shed a light on a little bit more. He does live in a one-story home. There are steps to get in, but he lives with 3 friends, and he states that through yes and no questions that his friends would be able to help him. So that is definitely a positive for external, but he does not live with his family. For what we can tell, his family is not currently around him to support him in that way. And of course, we have the biggest barrier here is he is limited English speaking to the extent we cannot tell with our yes and no questions. So that's something that will need to be further evaluated later on in the sessions once he is extubated.
So some interventions that we have considered for this patient, we want to do some passive range of motion to maintain what the patient already has and prevent contractures. We also want to continue working on positional changes, being able to tolerate upright, and just kind of working towards a very long-term goal of being able to transfer and do some things on his own. And then also just educating on the importance of passive range of motion and positional changes for function, as well as preventing contractures and paying attention to integument and preventing wounds. Finally, some of our long-term goals at this time is tolerating upright position and progressing bed mobility by decreasing assistance so that the patient can be more independent and more functional.